and welcome again to Women to Women. I'm Carol Paz, your hostess for tonight, and we have with us Connie Friend, co-pastor with her husband Stan at Capital Christian Center. And we're going to meet Connie in just a moment, but before we do that, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Carpa Nevada LLC, importer of fine Portuguese olive oils, international teas, and balsamic vinegar, as well as Vila Basque Cafe, home of Pete's famous Basque chorizo. And now let's turn to Connie. Connie, I'd like to thank you so much for being with us tonight. What a privilege and an honor to have you on our program.
Thank you, Carol.
You know, I believe you are the first woman pastor that we've had, and you have written a book, which we're going to introduce in the second part. So I'm really excited to get this started because it's rare. It's not uncommon. I don't know whether I should term it rare or not, but we find so few women pastors in our country today. So that I know that has been a challenging educational feat as well as a call upon your heart, which is very special. But before we get into that, tell us about where do you come from originally? Where were you born?
Well, I was born in, near Salem, Oregon, and that's where I grew up for the first 18 years of my life. I graduated high school there, and then I went to Northwest University in Seattle.
In Seattle. So you truly are a West Coast girl.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And I'm an East Coast and a Midwesterner, so this should be a good comparison here. All right, Connie, when you were growing up, do you have other brothers and sisters that you grew up with?
I have two sisters. One is 4 years older, and the other is 5 years younger. So quite a spread.
Okay. Are they also involved in pastoral work?
No. Well, one is.
Okay.
Her husband does a prison ministry up in Eastern Washington.
Okay.
Yes.
So was your father or your mother involved in ministry work as well?
Right after they got saved, I know my dad was a street preacher, and then they moved to the West Coast. They were from Ohio, and they moved to
I'm from Ohio.
Are you?
Yes.
Well, then they moved to the West Coast, and then because of the three daughters, he needed to get a better paying job, so he went to work in construction. And he's always been a volunteer at church.
Okay.
Both my mom and dad have been.
All right. Yeah. So as you're growing up in Salem, Oregon, what's it like at that time? You're still pretty young. What was popular at that time in the country, if you can remember, of films, of music? How did it affect you?
Well, I actually was not allowed to go to movies.
Okay.
So I wasn't very influenced by pop culture very much, and I went to a private school.
All right.
And but I was blessed to go to a really great church. It was called People's Church in Salem, Oregon. Really great pastor, wonderful youth group, and I got involved in singing and traveling with music from a really young age. And that continued all the way into college, and that's how I met my husband, was from traveling and singing. Okay. And so that was the biggest influence in my life.
It's amazing to me, Connie, that the other skills that you have been given in music and with voice, you found a pathway because of a youth group, because of friendships made within that youth group, to go forward with those abilities and to use them for Christ, to use them for the good news. So where did you, after graduating from high school, you went to Northwest, and what was your course of study?
Well, actually, I studied a lot of basic courses, and of course, I took music as well. And I married my husband when I was only 19. He was finishing college, and he was ready to go into the ministry right away as a youth pastor. And so I left school to marry him, and we entered the ministry right away. Well, he did. And I vowed to follow him around to the ends of the earth, which I did for many years.
Now, what does that mean, Connie? You traveled to the ends of the earth. Where all have you been?
Well, first we went to Alaska, and we were youth pastors there. Then we went to Chicago, and then Missouri, where my husband got his master's degree.
All right.
And then back to the West Coast, where he got his doctorate while working at churches on the West Coast.
Okay, so he's very well educated.
Yes,
All
yes.
right.
And then he became a chaplain too. So he traveled with the Marine Corps he was with the Navy serving the Marine Corps.
Okay.
So he went right at the end of the Gulf War, the first Gulf War. So he was in Kuwait for a while. He was in Japan for a while. And during that time is when we had our 3 babies. So he was gone most of the time when they were little.
All right. And those 3 children, what are their names?
We have Tyler, who is 22, and Alyssa, who is 20, and Grayson, who is 19.
Wow. You are a young bride and you're a young mother, and that's why you look so young. Okay.
Well, we waited 8 years to have children, actually. Through all that education, we waited.
All right. I have a question, because there are many young people who just want, either before they graduate from high school or right out of high school, they want to get married. Now, you were 19, and there was a purpose. You wanted to be with your husband, who was studying for the ministry, traveling. In general, what insights do you have, or what lessons have you learned or thought about in marrying young?
Ooh, in marrying young, you have to be willing to change and grow together. I don't think you can expect, even within a 10-year time frame, to be the same person you were when you were younger. And you need to have common interests, even hobbies that you can do together, or at least something that ties you together with your time.
Yes.
Because work is not enough.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very wise statement. With our husbands, or with the potential husbands that we are looking at, there need to be shared interests. So if you are an animal lover, or if you are an artist, a painter, whatever that may be, there has to be respect between the two of you for those interests.
Right.
And there are reasons, they're such healthy. For example, between you and your husband, what interests do you share?
Well, he actually is an avid outdoorsman. He loves to hunt and fish, and I grew up with all sisters. I didn't like to hunt or fish, but I learned to tag along.
Okay.
So I realized really early on that if I wanted to spend time with him and I wanted to grow in my relationship with him, I needed to tag along.
Okay.
So I often went fishing. I didn't like to fish, but I would tag along and go down the river bank and watch and visit and talk and ride in the car. And it didn't have anything to do with fishing. It was being together.
Do you know how to bait a hook?
I do.
Okay.
Yes.
So you picked up the pole, right?
Yes.
You picked up the pole.
Yes.
Now, I wanted to ask also, you made an interesting statement that even in a decade's time, even in a 10-year period of a marriage, you are still getting to know one another. You have, and you waited 8 years before you had children. And I think that is often a keen insight to have, in the early years of a marriage, or even in the first 5 and 6 years, wait to get to know one another, because the marriage relationship is so much different than being single. And before you bring other little people into that relationship, you want to have a real stable marriage and stable understanding of one another as parents to be. I think that's really important.
It is. It is really important.
Now, by living in other cultures, your husband was in Japan, all right? He was in the Gulf War, and those are very different areas of the world. But it's also a time to grow emotionally and mentally and socially. What have you noticed that he brought back from those cultures that has made something of a difference in your marriage, perhaps, or in his pastoral words?
I think just understanding human nature, and that goes across the board. Well, within the U.S. military, even, you have cultures from all across America and different nations, even within the military. And many are so young when they enter. And I think it gave him a deeper understanding of where the normal culture, social barriers are, even knowing what some young people would consider sin and what others wouldn't, and understanding how to relate to them and talk to them in a different way. And just, I think being a religious person puts a stigma on you sometimes, but when you learn to just be normal, to be one of the guys, that he was always wanted in the Marine Corps because he was always with them. He would go on those 26-mile hikes all through the night, and he would keep up with them and go out to the field and do services with them. He didn't expect them to come to the chapel. He went to them.
And isn't that key? I mean, Christ was with the people. He
Right.
went to the people. And when we have a friendship with another person, male or female, we spend a lot of time doing what they enjoy doing, spending time getting to know them, talking with them. And that's a very comforting relationship. When someone is not a believer and they're even afraid to talk about it or they're afraid to approach a subject, but having someone who doesn't push it with you,
Right.
having someone who just spends time with you, that's being Christ right there.
It is.
That's being Christ. Now, Connie, you co-pastor. So what kind of a schedule do you and your husband have in the church itself?
Well, we always have our phones on. So even at night, if someone
Yes.
needs us at the hospital or something, we'll go. Other than that, we try to work 4 full days a week in the office. And then we really try to take 2 full days off because Sunday is such a full day for us.
Yes. So your off days are perhaps Monday and what?
They're actually Friday and Saturday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Getting ready for the big weekend.
Yeah.
And the week ahead.
Right.
The week ahead. Now, you minister to women primarily or to the whole congregation?
To the whole congregation,
All right.
but I do run the women's ministry group at our church.
Okay. And may I ask this? Women network very well together, perhaps even more so than men do. in many
Absolutely, they do.
Why do you suppose that is?
Because women talk, women communicate, women love relationship. Men, you have to almost pull it out of them sometimes just
It's
to
not
get
a
them
natural
to
thing
visit.
with
Right.
them. Do you think there's a sense of competitiveness or there's a sense of this is my ground, nobody come on my ground
With the men,
with the men?
I believe a lot of that is a Nevada mentality, truly.
Oh.
I believe it's a West Coast thing
Okay.
because
That's interesting.
so many people move here that want to be independent. It's very much like Alaska, an independent mindset. I don't need anyone else. I can do this on my own. I can have a successful life all by myself. And I think that separates men because they don't want to be needy and they don't want to appear like they are asking for support,
It's a tough thing for them to do.
It is.
So when we talk about women's issues, and we're going to bring those up in the second half of the program, and also I want to make our audience, our listener, very much aware that you have a very special book that's out. It's called Made for the Moment, Our Time, Our Life, and Our Legacy. So we're going to discuss that as soon as we come back. Don't go away. The best is yet to come.
Are you looking for a healthier lifestyle? A more nutritious diet? Do you care about quality? If your answer is yes, or if you are just curious, come into Villa Basque Deli and Cafe right here in Carson City, Nevada. Discover fine Portuguese extra virgin olive oils, vintage balsamic vinegars, and a wide assortment of international health teas provided by distributor Carpa Nevada LLC. In addition to these terrific items, Villa Basque is also the home of Pete's famous Basque chorizo, handmade on the premises from Pete's secret family recipe. Satisfy your culinary curiosities. Don't delay.
Welcome back to the second half of our program. We're with Connie Friend, who is co-pastor at the Capital Christian Center. And Connie has written I think a much admired book. And we're going to bring that up the second half. But we're just talking right now about her ministry that she has to the entire church, as well as to women. And Connie, in this day and age, I mean, there are issues all over the place. There are political issues. There are educational issues. There are racial issues. There are fashion issues, okay? There are skin issues. So what do you find that the women that you minister with and to, what's happening out there in our world today that really concerns them, that they're having to deal with?
Well, I think right now the economy is a huge factor. Many women who don't have spouses that help out at home, financially.
Yes,
They're
yes.
finding themselves having to work more than one job and putting their children in daycare. I think those concerns are very real, just trying to make ends meet and having a happy family that's growing up the way that you had always envisioned your family would be. It's difficult.
It's very difficult. And as a former teacher of 30 years, Connie, I could tell in my classrooms, I taught at the elementary and all the way up to the university level, but it's very evident, even at the early stages in elementary, the children that have been schooled during part of the day in a public school system, or even in a private school system, and then spend another 3, 4, 5 hours at a daycare center, and seeing parents arrive at 7 p.m., 8 p.m., and those little ones, they have been given food, okay, we've helped them with their homework, but I'm never quite sure the values or the language that's being used in that center by everybody, okay? So that's a huge issue for a very caring mother, a caring parent. I hear that all the time. All right, besides the economy, how are marriages doing these days?
I think people are finding them quite challenging right now. And I do believe the economy is a huge factor.
And it must be a challenge to you, Connie, that when you're talking with women, there's so much patience that we need to have with one another under these difficult economic days. Patience with the family, patience for work in many families, and just patience with one another, doing a lot more with a lot less.
That's true. That's true, but it also changes our own character. Those situations, they put us under pressure, and it causes us, it can, if we choose to, it'll cause us to increase our own capacity and what we can handle, what we can deal with, how we can flourish in a difficult situation.
Right.
And I don't think there's one person on earth who doesn't find themselves in a challenging situation sometime within their life.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I learned very quickly, living in the Middle East without refrigeration to depend upon for the next day's meal, etc. Everything had to be used up within that day. So I had to learn to remeasure, rethink serving sizes, rethinking foods, types of foods, what will last in the heat and what won't. And it was a challenge, but it forced me to think differently. And as a result, I think I'm a better cook today than I've certainly was 25 or 30 years ago. Okay, in addition to marriages, there's a real issue of raising children. It's hard. If you have 3, 4, or 5, even if you have just one, because they're exposed to so many new trends, new thoughts, new ideas away from the family. And you find that counseling mothers, counseling parents together also is a part of your day or your week's work.
It is. I'll tell you what helps the most in raising children is, first of all, knowing who you are as a woman. I believe that God created each and every one of us with such a distinct purpose and a cause and a destiny, that if you can stay on that purpose, it's easy to relate that to your kids and to pass that on to your kids. And then they can walk through life with a sense of destiny and purpose as well.
And the question out there will be, so how do I find my purpose?
Well, I believe there are lots of things you can do. Tangible daily decisions that you can make that will get you to your purpose. And as a woman of faith, as a woman who really believes that God puts us together in families, the Bible says God puts the lonely in families. I believe that family is the church. And so I believe if you get yourself planted in the church, that you're going to find your purpose because you're staying close to God. You're staying close to people who will encourage you in your path, and they will help you to get closer to your purpose rather than getting farther away. If you hang out in the wrong places, you're going to go the wrong way.
Yes. And the Bible also says, we're known by the company we keep, to kind of paraphrase it. So it's very important that parents keep tab on who their children make friends with, the other homes that they spend time in, and to be alert, vigilant.
Right.
Now, Connie, I'd like to return to this book, Made for the Moment. How did you make a decision to write a book in the first place?
Well, a lot of it started just with my own path because I didn't know who I was. And I believe life moves so fast. and you make decisions that bring your life in a different direction than what you might have thought it would go.
Yes, yes.
You have children, you have careers, you have life change that happens. Many times tragedy happens, and you find yourself in a place and you go, how did I get here?
Yes.
This book is meant to kind of be a guide for people. It's a 6-week devotion, actually, into finding your purpose and finding your destiny and staying on course.
So that question that I posed just a few moments ago, and that the listening audience, I'm sure, is asking themselves, okay, how do I find who I am? How do I find out what I'm supposed to be doing? What is my purpose, in essence? And so this is a book that encompasses your life, so to speak, and the lives of other women that you have ministered to or that you have spoken with.
There are actually 6 stories from women that I have met within the last year or two here in Carson City, 6 stories within there. And it tells what they've gone through and how they have come to the point of trusting God and knowing who they are and knowing that their purpose is far bigger than they themselves.
Yes. When was this book published?
About 2 weeks ago.
Oh, so it's hot
brand
off the
new.
presses,
It is.
okay.
It is.
And I know it's being read by several of the women that I know in the community here in Carson City. So we are wishing you the very best with this.
Thank you.
Now, I'm assuming, Connie, that this book contains women of different circumstances, different ages.
Yes. All the way to 85.
85. Can you tell us about that 85-year-old without revealing her last name?
She's a beautiful lady who, through the years, she prayed for her husband for, I believe, over 35 years that he would come to know the Lord. And he was a hard-driven cop in San Francisco. And as she prayed for him one day, he finally surrendered to the Lord. And he gave up alcohol and completely turned over his life. You may have heard of Cops for Christ. He was one of the gentlemen who started that. And I got to meet her probably when she was about 75, and now she's 85. And she continued to volunteer all the way through those years since I've known her. And she's just a beautiful example of tenacity and determination and grace under pressure.
And I think that's such a healthy word for so many marriages out there, that as women, we sometimes feel like we're walking the path alone. And if you're not on the same path, it is hard. It is hard. But the power of prayer is beyond description for me. And when you love someone, immediate family or extended family, friendships, whoever is in need, and who isn't in need of prayer, but I pray for them. And I just keep tabs inside a little closet of all my prayer requests and the date when the prayer was answered.
That's beautiful.
Not one prayer has gone unanswered. And it's surprising. The timing of the Lord is perfect.
It is. I know. He's never late. He's always right on time.
So help us understand, Connie, in your own life, do you say that when you become a pastor, there's a call placed upon your heart?
I believe there's a call on everyone.
Okay.
I truly do. The Bible tells us that we are all called. And I don't mean that means we have to go into full-time ministry, but we have a calling on our life, a destiny to fulfill, and that's up to us to figure that out. And the people that are placed within our sphere of influence are there for a reason. We need to wake up and look up. Get out of our circumstances and out of our own little bubble. Look up to the people that are around us and begin to be what God has called you to be, because you are called to be something, you know?
Let me ask you this. When were you aware that you were having maybe an extra tug of a call placed upon your life, upon your heart? How old were you?
You would be surprised. It was fairly recent. As I told you, I followed my husband around.
Yes.
And we went to Australia in 2004.
Okay.
And at the time, I was really struggling with my place, not knowing who I was, what I was supposed to be doing, and why was I following him all around and waiting for him to tell me what God was saying next. And
just 8 years ago.
Yes. And so I went to Australia, and I was in a situation where I was near the women of Hillsong Church. Many people are familiar with Hillsong because of their music. And there I witnessed women who, for the first time I saw it, where they really took responsibility for those that were in their world. And they said, I'm going to do something about what's right around me. Not, I need to wait to become Mother Teresa. No, it's who's right in front of me. And I came home and it changed everything that I did in our church for women and for men and for my own family and my own children and their friends. And it just set my destiny on a new course because I realized that God had called me to something unique right here where I am.
Why do you suppose it took so long?
Oh.
Do you look back and reflect on that?
Oh, all the time. That's in the book. All the time.
All the time.
Waiting, and making excuses. We need to come to a point, and maybe it takes us turning 40 to get to the point where we will lay down the excuses and say, this is mine, this is my life, this is the reality, and I can change it.
Do you suppose we have to lose something or some things along the way to do without things being taken away from us that we hadn't expected, for us to begin to say, ooh, I need to reassess what this means in my life. Why did that happen? Why did it happen to me?
Yes, I think that happens to all of us. It's just life's way of getting our attention. You know?
Or Christ's way of getting our
Yes,
attention. Yes,
absolutely. I think he's always trying to get our attention. It's whether or not we will listen.
And whether we still choose to ignore, and as you say, offer this reason, that excuse. So can you help us understand, Connie, this trip to Australia changed you dramatically as mother, as wife, as probably sister, family member. What one or two ways can you share with us that here's what I was before, and after that trip to Australia, this is what I'm doing now that's different?
Yes. One specific way is just that you know, we all allow influences into our life.
Right, right.
Sometimes we have negative voices speaking to us in our life. Sometimes it's a mother-in-law. Sometimes it's someone you have no choice but to let them in your life.
Right.
And it's a negative voice, and it can be disturbing. It can drag you down. It can disrupt you. And I believe that's one thing that I chose to rise. I put a card on my bathroom counter that said rise. And every day, if I started to believe or started to remember negative things that I had heard, or even thoughts that I've thought about myself. Oh, you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not well equipped enough. All of those things, just to lay them aside and say, I am qualified. I am loved by my God. I am valued and treasured, and I will rise.
And he will equip me.
Yes, he will.
So what a wonderful way to come back into pastorship and co-pastorship with a husband.
Yes.
Has he noticed differences?
Oh, yes. Yes. I'm much more confident now than I used to be. And even in areas when I wouldn't have thought I could do it, I do it because I know that God has placed me in this position, and I'm not going to waste it. I'm not going to squander a moment made for this moment.
Made for this moment. And I can imagine that the messages that you share with your congregation, with your church family, and outside of the church have also changed
Dramatically. I lead worship as well every Sunday, and I don't really give people a choice. They need to rise and learn how to worship and love God and use their voice. You know, for years I didn't use my voice. I was quiet. I was shy. I was hidden. I would stay seated. And I had to learn to rise. And I believe that that gives you power. It gives you authority over your life when you will choose to rise.
Well, we would love to have you come back, Connie, in the future and let that voice rise, okay?
Yes.
It's so nice to have had you. Thank you.
Thank you so
again.
much. It's
And
lovely
thank
to meet you.
Yes, and thank our audience for listening. So until we see you again next week, have a good week. Take care.